Yeah, take your time. Couple of minutes.
Whatever.
Yeah,
It's still coming, so you don't want to have people walking in the middle of what you're doing.
yeah. It's 5 minutes. Two.
He would be a good guy to make sure everything is cool. If you have any IT problems, he would be the guy to talk to. Good evening. Good to see everyone here tonight. We're having a very special night because we have someone who was brought up as a Jain, a quite religious Jain family, and he's going to explain a little bit of how the Jainism influenced and maybe integrated with Buddhism. So tonight, Prem has been with us for this particular Sangha for quite a while. So he's what we call our lay minister. So I think we're going to have a fantastic talk. So, Prem, I'll leave it all up to you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thanks everybody who have come here today. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate Rian to invite me to give this talk. I've been in this Sangha for at least 2 years, and I've been coming. I've learned a lot, and I have background in Jainism from childhood, and I've learned Buddhism, so I thought it would be a great idea to at least have a conversation about Buddhism and Jainism today to the extent we can, and then we can continue the conversation whenever you want to pick up the phone and want to talk to me about Buddhism and Jainism combined especially. So we'll start with 1 or 2 minutes of what is traditionally called the Jain meditation or mantra. I'll talk about mantra later on a little bit. Just introduction, not anything long, because I don't want you to get bored and also feel like you're out of place. So, but let's start with this. I think most of you can read the first line there, Namo Arhato, right? And also written in Thai, Namo Arhato, which everybody knows means I bow to Arhat. I praise Arhat. Arhat, everybody knows here, at least in Theravada Buddhism, what Arhat is. And then I said equal to Namo Arhantanam, which exactly the same word is a plural form of Arhat or Arhant. Arhant is the original Sanskrit word which Thai has become Arhat. Pali also has Arhat as well as Pali also has Arhant. So Namo Arhantanam means exactly the same thing what it means in Buddhism, in Jainism. So we'll start with the very, very, very common variable between Jainism and Buddhism, saying Namo Arhantanam. So most meetings in Jainism, and I am a Digambar Jain, which means I know very little about the other sect. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But this is how it is. Any meeting that starts in Jainism, anything that happens at home in Jainism, when you walk into a temple or you do anything else, you start with this line, which I think all Thai people know very well, Namo Arhato, which is the same thing as I say, Namo Arhantanam. So, and then there is a longer version of it, and it is always repeated 9 times usually, or you can do it more, but 9 times. and then you start the meeting, or you can continue doing a puja or whatever else you're doing, to get into the mood of spirituality, that you are bowing to Arhat. And we'll talk about what Arhat means in a minute. It is not a creator God. So Arhat, so I'll just do this because I'm so used to it. You may just say it in yourself, Namo Arhato, or just listen. But I would like you to get into the idea that we are here to some extent on a spiritual path, rather than just in a meeting to make a business call or something like that. So take a good posture to the extent possible, and you don't have to repeat after me. I'm just going to say it 9 times because that is the tradition, as I pointed out. If you go to a temple, Jain temple, you'd hear it all the time, a lot. Namo Arihantanam, 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 Namo Arihantanam. So most of you probably know the meaning of this word Arhat, but if you don't, I'll give you the Jain version of the meaning, because there's differences in certain categories of certain people, from what I've read and when I've talked to people. Arhat comes from 2 syllables, Ari. Ari means enemy, and Hant is to kill. So I bow to the person, or bow to Arhat, who has killed his internal enemies, defilements in particular, growth, and we talk about defilements in Buddhism a lot. The person who has killed all the defilements is Arhat, according to Jains, and we bow to him. So a person who goes to the temple, so this is a photo, a very simple temple, neighborhood temple, as I say. This is how a neighborhood temple would look like. I would show you probably some big temples photos, but you can see them all the time. This is where I would go every morning when I'm in Jaipur. Here is actually my brother, his wife, and my sister in the temple. And they would go every morning for 5 minutes, for 2 hours, or whatever. They'll start with Namo Arhantanam. And this is a common practice to chant these things, chant these mantras, and to get into the mode. The temple looks like this. There's a statue of Arhat in the background, just like Buddha. He looks just like Buddha. And people sometimes go to a Jain temple in India and they say, oh, there's Buddha here. Okay, this looks very, very similar. And that's a common thing to do, is to go to a Jain temple in the morning and do this. And here is another. So I'm going to show you a bunch of photos because many of you are not aware of, so rather than talking about a lot of philosophy, I'm going to show you a bunch of photos. You get somewhat more familiar. I know some of you have been in India for a long time and so on, but still. Here's another inside of the Jain temple. And this is a temple at home. This is my sister's home. She does not go to the temple every day. Traditionally, a childhood, unless we went to the temple, even now, most Jains will go to a temple in the morning for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, for half an hour. If you go to a Jain temple in the morning, there will be lots and lots of people there, and so on and so forth. So this is my nephew. He is just performing, getting ready to start morning rituals for the Jain temple. There's a Jain statue, which you don't see it right now here, but anyway. Here is a very famous Jain temple, or bunch of temples, hundreds of temples, and a tourist spot all over people go from all over the world, called Palitana Jain temples. And Jain temples have very, very intricate structure, as well as you'll see, inside the temple also, there's intricate carving and so on and so forth. About everything has some meaning, and you have to figure out what it's emphasizing, what this temple is emphasizing. And this is another temple, which is not a neighborhood temple, but also every town will have a big temple outside the Jain main center. And big events will take place there. If you go to Sunday in a place like this. This is in Kolkata. This temple, I go there very often whenever I'm in Kolkata. So I'm trying to see that I don't take too many photos straight from the internet. That way I am familiar with them. I can speak with confidence and you can talk. I can sort of make you aware of this. So inside a Jain temple, not inside a temple, outside the temple, when you walk into it, 100 feet or so, you will see this kind of pillar. The idea being that if you're passing by the temple, then you can also just, for 5 seconds, pray, say a prayer like Namo Harantanam, and then walk by. So this is very common, and you can see before you walk into the temple, this pillar will be slightly far away, so you get into the spiritual mood to walk into the temple, because as soon as you see this, you'll start saying Namo Harantanam or some other prayer that is in your mode. The idea is to really get into the... So here is another temple, and this is a different sect, as I said. There are two very, very important different sects in Jainism, and we'll talk about that. Here the statues, as you can see, this is from Los Angeles, is the decorations, there is crown, and so on and so forth. I don't know the details as to what all they put, but this is a September, and they also, you'll see, notice this, they put a little cloth outside their mouth so that okay, so this is the idea behind that, is not to kill insects or something like that. That's the idea behind wearing a cloth outside your mouth, because as we'll talk about ahimsa, how deeply it's enrooted in the Jain philosophy and Jain practice. And Digambar sect statues will be bare minimum, no clothing, no. Some people will put little flowers and so on and so forth. So if you walk into a temple and you see a Buddha statue, the way to tell it's not Buddha is actually there's no clothing. Jain statues are all naked. There's nothing left. That's the whole idea, is just to explain that no clothing is needed. And we'll see some photos. And this is a very famous Jain statue, about 1,000 years old. And all Jain statues are made of one stone. Never to add or subtract anything. It has to be only one stone. The idea is purity. So, as my father would say, a Jain statue of the same size versus a statue, say in the Hinduism, a Jain statue will cost about 10 times more, because while they're making the statue, they'll do something wrong, and they'll have to start all over again. So Jain statues are very expensive. This is 57 feet tall statue. Every 12 years, there'll be a big celebration here, and people will come from all over the world to celebrate this. And here is, this is one of the few statues. It's the only monk, so let's put it this way, who became Arhant, that he has some kind of plants growing on his feet and so on. And the story goes that he was standing and meditating for 6 months, and he said, I'm not getting enlightenment. So what I'm doing wrong? I'm standing on my brother's, who was the king, brother's land. So I think somebody explained to him, if you say you're standing in your brother's land, you will never get enlightenment. There's no brother, nothing in enlightened position. You have to be without I, you, or what have you. So this is a celebration here, which is quite a marvelous thing to watch if you happen to go to Bangalore. Every 12 years they do this. They set up this whole thing, and they do different color, there are rules about that, what you can pour, what you cannot pour, and different colors. Every day you'll have this, and beautiful, beautiful scenery. I couldn't find a good video for that. So this is a Jain temple. On the top is a Jain temple, and the bottom is the statue inside, which is highly decorated, is in Kobe, Japan. What had happened after the Second World War was that Indian government gave scholarship to many Japanese students to come and live in India because Japan was suffering. So these kids were probably needed some financial support. Even though India was poor, they came, many of them came. They went back, and many of them became Jains. And there are about 5,000, 2,000 to 10,000, the numbers vary, people who converted Jains in Japan, and they've set up about 3 different temples, and they follow the Swetambar sect. Not very common. Jains don't go outside and say, let me help you convert into Jainism. So the population of Jains have been going down for the last 100, 200, 500 years, or 1,000 years, or actually since 1200s, it's been going down non-stop. So we'll get into this. So that's just to show you the temples, to give you in the feel of that you want to know something more about it, or something not, or what have you. So I'm going to get into history. I'm not going to read every word that's written there, but I'm going to explain the main idea. So when did it all start? When did Jainism start? So Jains will say Jainism has been there forever. Truth has always been there. You don't search for, or you don't develop truth, etc. There's no developer. Nobody started this thing. So that's the general idea. But let's look at history. So the Vedic age, Brahman and others, and there are many other philosophies in India at the time. There were 6 at least different philosophies that existed, which are well-established philosophies, and many of these ideas have come into different religions, in Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. We're not going to go over this, but you probably recognize yoga, which is Patanjali's yoga, and he was a great teacher and wrote books, and so this is also partly now in different religions. Then from that, the Vedas developed, and then Vedas is the continued. We had Upanishads. The philosophical side developed a little bit later. Initially, there were no such thing as creator gods. There's Indra that you know in Thailand. The word Indra is used, and Vishnu, who was also in those Vedas. But there are many of these new gods, so to speak, were not there. Some Jains claim that this concept of Jainism was also there already, but that's debatable. Then Upanishads came around then. Then the most important thing, that the ascetics were always there, people who didn't like these Vedas and other people. And they were always there. And the group that became, the 2 or 3 groups names I might have written here, Charvakas, he was the famous guy who said, eat, drink, and be merry. After you're dead, nobody knows what happens. So that was a big famous Indian philosopher. He's not being used, is there that much in teaching, so on. Ajivika, Jainism, and Buddhism, they are the ascetics in the sense that they didn't believe in the concept of creator, at least, at the very least, no creator. They argued. They also, the most important thing, according to the stories, what Jains said, why are you sacrificing animals? And obviously there's big parties after some event would take place, like marriage and so on. And some ascetics basically objected to that, and that the concept of Jainism started from that basic idea of the animals should not be killed. The women were also treated poorly, and in many cases women were sacrificed too. And as you know, up to about 200-300 years ago, a lot of women died. I think British actually have documented 8,000 women in those few years killed themselves because their husband died, and partly because they were not treated well after that, and partly because that was a tradition for years and years, hundreds of years. So women used to jump. Then also, when the Mughals attacked India, many of the women who were in the palaces and all, they will also commit suicide by jumping into the... So the idea of that was quite interesting, that Jains and Buddhists said, no, women have equal power. So they rebel. Rebel against what? Rebel against Brahmanical monopoly. You can go to God or heaven only through Brahmins. There was no caste system. There is no caste system, as you know, in Buddhism, although there are some leftover, some ideas which are already there. Like even here, I was just told, I was trying to get some information about Buddhism last couple of weeks, and this lady told me that marriages are marriages use the Brahminical system for getting married in Thailand a lot. And as you know, a lot of activities also are in the palace with Brahmins coming from India, or those who live here. The most important thing was the creator, against creator. There is no creator. That was the basic philosophy in the Jain philosophy. So there was a lot of debates on that, but we will not go into that. So they kept the basic idea of enlightenment. Karma they kept, and asceticism, which was there going on, was kept. So the Jains were there, we don't know since when for sure, but the historically well-established figure is Mahavira. According to Jains, he was 509, 600 BC approximately, 600 BC. And the historians say that's not right now. Maybe he was a little bit later, just like Buddhists. Buddhism also the same story, the Buddha. But the point is that, okay, the Buddha was always in almost all historical other scriptures and other was a little bit later, a little bit after Jains were, Mahavira was already. He left home, he was a prince, he left home at the age of 30, 12 years of similar to Buddha, he went around and the story goes, well, there are Jains there. He became a Jain monk. How did he know if there were the Jains were there for about 200 years earlier than him. And then he taught for 42 years all about Jainism. We'll hear a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So Jainism, as I said, according to them, has always been there. And if you ask a Jain, how long has Jainism there? It's for infinite number of years. That's ever since humanity has existed. And humanity, according to Jains, have existed forever. And according to Jains, he was the 24th, I use the word supreme teacher, or Tirthankara, he was Arhant, he was 24th in the lineage. And historically, 24th is fairly well established, if you would say not well established. It's well established, but dates and all are not clear. And the 23rd, Parasnath, was, if you go in certain parts of Bihar, is very well celebrated. I've traveled around all those areas. And approximately 200 years, because there are some stories which are very established as to what existed at Parasnath time and what changed between him and later on. So here is a Parasnath temple, and there is a similarity. Again, I'm to touch upon a little bit of similarity between Buddhism and Jainism, because I'm here to talk about similarities. Sometimes when you go to talks, they talk about differences. I want to talk about similarities more than just the differences. In the case of Parasnath, the statue may not be all that clear, but there is a snake hood on the top of his head, and that's always the Parasnath who would have that. And in Buddhist suttas, there are a lot of Buddhist suttas where Buddhists talk about Jains, and the word which was used, which is still used for Jain, is called Niragranth. Niragranth means somebody who has no knots. He has gotten rid of his some problems of emotions and other things. So without any attachment, maybe right word to explain that. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that'll be easy. That's an easy thing to do, right? So let me again say that Mahavira started just one or two sentences. About 600 BC, he was born, and then he is considered historically the person who basically started Jainism, or the philosophy of Jainism, or most of the philosophy of Jainism. And Parasnath was the one before him, according to at least historically, to the extent possible, to the extent the history exists. So this is what, again, the similarities between Jainism and Buddhism I'm going to talk about, and then we'll talk about the fundamental differences. So one question that always comes up in everybody's mind is, where did I, or where do I come from? Where do you come from? Okay. So in either there is a creator or there was no creator. There are basically two choices. Two important. So just like in Buddhism, Jainism, probably before Buddhism, argued that there is no creator. That's what we call them, rebellions. Okay. So who am I? This is where Buddhism or Brahmanism, or I would say Advaitic Vedanta, we can talk about that a little bit if necessary. And especially between Jains and Buddhism, there's a fundamental difference. Jainism, Vedanta was already there, and people talk about Brahman already, and they talked about Indra and other gods, just like the Greek gods, was already there. So the biggest contribution of Jains was, at the time, was that there is no creator. And that's probably the most important thing by that time. And so who are we? So similar to, again, Hinduism, there is an Atma. And there is something called the Jiva. They use the word Jiva, which is slightly different from the Atma. And there are a lot of debates, lots of debates, and a lot of, what I would say, scriptures written about this Jiva and debate. So what is this Jiva? So the questioner has asked question, why do you walk? Where do you come from? What's going on here? Is there something inside you that you cannot see? There is no existence, it's weightless, and so on and so forth. So the question would be asked, and these days I would tell people, there is weightless energy going through these wires. Do you see the energy? The same concept can be possibly thought through, and those who read about consciousness quite a bit, there's a lot of debate. Even today, as of today, we don't know, at least scientifically, where consciousness comes from. There's a lot of argument as to, there's even this debate about every little particle has consciousness. I'm talking about serious scientific debates. There are still debates. Where does it come from? So I remember in high school, because of this studying, we were having this kind of Jain philosophical background. I asked my physics teacher, what do you know about gravity? He says, we know about gravity because the apple fell from the tree and Newton discovered gravity. So how do you know there's gravity? How do you have a proof that there's gravitational forces? And until about 2015, there was no proof. Now there is some proof, but then still the question becomes, is this an evidence or is this a proof? So same question can be asked about consciousness, that do you have evidence? And people say, we don't have evidence, but people walk, people live, people are born, people die. What is that? Why is that happening? That's the argument given by the Jains. So they said, there is Jiva. We don't see it, we don't know what it is, but there is something, some energy is driving us. Oh, that's the interpretation my father gave me every time. There's something is happening, because there is no creator then. Why cannot there be creator? You see, the creator concept basically they rejected. You can argue about that. But in any case, because the question is always the same question, I think you heard this many times. If somebody created us, who created the creator? So the answer is, in Jainism, for infinite number of years, we have existed, and we will continue to exist. There is no creator at all. So, but there is another thing which I have written there, karma. Karma is a very interesting concept in Vedantic time period, in Hinduism, in Jainism, as in Buddhism. If you go in great detail, you'll find the differences, but we will not talk greatly about the differences today. A little bit, and even I sometimes get lost with the differences. But the Jainism the idea was very simple. I like the idea very much. And we'll contrast that in a minute with those of you who come to the Buddha circle here. We have studied skandhas and everything else. So there is Jiva, there is Atma, and this is where Jainism created this idea, philosophical idea, that karmas are everywhere. There are these, again, weightless or particles everywhere, just like energy is weightless, or almost weightless, if you can argue about weight. So, and they come depending on what you do, depending on what's going on, and attached to your jiva. They make your jiva or atma impure. So you are living right now with an impure atman. And the whole idea about life is that if you feel better, you want to purify your atman. That is Jain philosophy. It's fairly simple, not very complicated. You have an atman. You purify your atma by doing whatever you want to do, or whatever you figured it out, or whatever you figured it out, or what others have told. Because this whole concept in Jainism is how do you get knowledge. So you get knowledge and you practice some things, and that's how you will purify yourself, and you will become arhat. So to become arhat in Jain, philosophically, that's the idea, is to purify your atman. So atman purification is moksha, which is used sometimes in Thai language. No dukkha, same story. Freedom from rebirth, etc. That story is very similar. Yeah.
Sorry, you jumped a little bit over this karma bit. So you mentioned karma as particles.
In Jainism, this specifically mentioned, yeah, I think I can hear him, but it might be a good idea, let me, because he says for recording purposes, you want to repeat that? Yeah.
Actually, the recording is from that, so if you repeat the question.
Oh, if I repeat the question. So I'll repeat the question, is that karma in Jainism are those particles. And in Jainism is very clearly mentioned many times, and this is debated in great length between Jains and whosoever the other philosophers were at the time. But the Indian tradition is beautiful. For those hundreds and hundreds of years, people used to debate. And they will have debates and debates, hundreds of years they would have debates, right? For the same topic will continue for 100 years sometimes, or it's still continuing probably. So that tradition, keeping that with that tradition, the karma, Jains settled on the idea there are these particles everywhere, just like viruses these days people say. They're everywhere. They're essentially weightless, and they come and attach to you inside you. And the characters you form are from those karmas, essentially. And once you get rid of those karma, you are arhat. So the same question arises again, where did this all come from? And just like Buddhism, there is no answer to that question. This has been there forever. And we don't know. That's one way of saying we don't know the answer. When you say something is from forever, then I say, okay, you don't know the answer. Is that right? Well, the person would say, no, I'm telling you, it's never been there. Okay, but that means you don't know it's been there or not. But that's something we don't debate in philosophically. So, but it's a unique way of thinking about it in a way if you buy it, because it's, if you study philosophy, we'll come back to this, maybe not, maybe this is a good time to explain. In philosophy, if you have a big philosophical point that you've started with, a lot of follow philosophy is based upon that, because that's common sense, right? Just like in physics, you start with a big bang, then a lot of what happened later on is very easy to understand. If you don't have big bang, then you don't know how to understand philosophy, physics that way. So a lot of philosophy depends upon the original basic statements that you make in philosophy. So in Jain philosophy, my father would say, has basically one assumption. And that's incredible. If you have just one assumption, any theory, anything, one or two assumptions, whatever. He would say it's one assumption that jiva has existed forever. Now you go on from there. Because then once you start thinking about birth and etc., it's very easy to follow from there. But if you start with the basic idea, basic philosophy, if you have lots of assertions to develop the basic philosophy, then it's a very difficult thing to then say this is justified. Less number of assumptions, better the philosophical or scientific development. That's what they would argue. So what is the path? We'll talk about the path, and then I'll argue, at least I'll try to argue, I'm not that good in this kind of developmental, in philosophical development. But in any case, I'll argue that because of those assumptions, where in Buddhism there's anatta And in Jainism, there is Atma or Atta. In Buddhism, there is none, right? We know this very well. And because of that, how the paths have separated, even though idea is the same, philosophically, idea in Buddhism and Jainism the same. You want to become Arhat. That's the philosophy. But we follow different approach because we made the initial assumption to be different. So I'm not going to discuss in great detail, but just like Buddhism has 6 different realms. You know, I really like the same, you can be born as a deva, or a human being, animals including ants, and you can go to hell. But Buddhism has 2 others, asuras, and those of you know, the one I really enjoy the word first time I heard about this, is imagination of hungry ghosts. Hungry ghosts are those creatures which have big belly, huge belly, and they have very small little neck, so they are always hungry. They're the greedy people of today, I think. So, in any case. So the path is, again, a lot of similarity between Jain path and Buddhist path. So path which was developed by Mahavira and others. They said, first and most important thing, probably the first and most important, probably the last and most important thing is samadhi. You know, in Thai they speak samadhi, or in Sanskrit they say samyak drishti, or the right view, or the proper view. Once you have a proper view, you have to develop proper view of something, proper philosophy. Once you have a proper view, again you can develop the rest of your philosophy accordingly based upon your proper view. So the most important thing in life is to develop a proper view. Very clear, clarity is the word we use all the time. Very clear what you're doing. If you have clarity, things will follow. So in spiritual path also, you need to really develop clarity. And there are details about what Samyak Drishti is. So that's where I was saying earlier, believe in the people who are Arhat. Go to them, listen to them, then reflect on them, and then do meditation on that. That's how you develop a... And this was very useful for me, I'll tell you in a second. The second is, then you, based upon that, you develop the knowledge, which sort of together, both first and second are considered together. In Buddhism, you have Eightfold Path. Those same ideas are basically summarized in three paths. In Buddhism has Samyak Drishti, remember? Samadhi. Buddhism, the first principle is you have to develop a very spiritual or very correct. The translation is right. Some people don't like the word right or wrong. That means there are wrong views. Yes, there are. But Samyak Drishti is the one you need to develop. You spend a lifetime developing the correct clarity on anything, or spiritually you develop many lifetimes to develop clarity. Who am I? And then you reach the level, who am I? Then you develop, and then you practice. You practice. Last one is some perfect or correct or right practice. And in Sanskrit, they are written as Samyak Drishti, Samyak Gyan, Samyak Charitra. So I think this is when I was teaching as a professor, I would ask the students, what do you want to be? He would say, I don't know. Usually most students will say, I don't know, but some would say, I want to be so-and-so, I want to be a lawyer. So then I would ask him 3 questions, Have you developed the right view of what a lawyer does? Have you developed how to become a lawyer, and then you practice to become a good lawyer? And this has actually helped me, because when I was deciding what I want to be, my father said, go through these 3 steps, and you figure it out what you want to be. If you have very clarity on these things, it'll be very good for you. So how to develop them? So you have to practice to develop them, right? So in Buddhism, the practice is first out of 5 precepts. You know all those 5 precepts, right? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not tell lies, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not do this, right? In Jainism, 5 precepts, 5 spiritual precepts you can call. First and most important one is for Jainism, ahimsa. Thou shalt not kill. And again, Jainism has structured many books on what ahimsa is. not to hurt anybody with your mind, with your vacha, samma vacha, which is again eightfold path, and gai. Gai means in Thai language is kai or gai, which means with your body. You will not hurt anybody mentally or physically is the right way to say it. You will not hurt anybody mentally or physically. If you don't do that, according to the Jain philosophy, or at least what my father said, if you believe in that, you automatically will not do other things. You will not tell lies because they'll hurt somebody. You will not steal things because it'll hurt something. You will not do other bad things, such as whatever else you can think of. You will not have defilements if you basically believe that thou shalt not hurt. That's the basic supreme idea behind ahimsa. So only thing you need in life is to think and become ahimsak, meaning experience with ahimsa. That is the whole idea about Jainism. So, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then there are more practices which we may talk about depending on the time. Any questions in the meantime? Now we're getting into the philosophy. So I'm happy to take questions, and Tom told me that you better ask people and he told me also not to go too fast.
Sure, I have a question. I missed the part where you said there was a main philosophical idea, and you said, did you say that Shiva has always existed, or what did you say?
Shiva?
What did you say was the main philosophical idea, the statement of Jainism?
The main idea is to become arhat, right? Is that what you were talking about? Is that right?
I thought you said something else, and I missed.
Okay, I was also talked about main philosophical idea being sammatiti, which is the same thing. I said that absolutely that you need to develop that because others will automatically follow. So you basically think about the view, your thinking, you develop your thinking, which is almost the same. Then there are detailed descriptions of that in the scriptures, what it means. It means you believe in arhants who came before you. And whatever they have said, you learn from them. Then you contemplate on their thoughts. And then you do meditation on those thoughts to really develop them. Then your other things like some jhana, right? The word used in Buddhism, jhana, samyak gyan and samyak charitra. And practice will follow because you truly, truly believe, then you will practice it. There's nothing will stop you because you believe it so strongly. So you need to develop this clarity of thought that I really want to do this. So that is the idea behind. I wouldn't call it Jainism alone. I think this was probably, you see, the few words in Jainism, they were developed by Jains. One was arhat, which then, of course, Buddhists also use the same word. And samyak gyan, that concept is there, but the words have been used by the Jains. Probably maybe Buddhists use it because sometimes within such a small period of time, who used which words first, I don't want to argue about that, but I just want to mention that Jains will talk about that. It doesn't matter to me. 2,600 years later, I don't care, I really don't care. But I really like this concept of three-step process of getting to. So if you didn't get the Buddhist enlightenment after studying Buddhism all these days, remember these 3 points. And in Jainism, there's also philosophy, just like in Zen philosophy, that you can get enlightenment in any moment in life as soon as you develop this thing. Although there's a path, which is a very long path, but you can also develop. At any point in time, you can develop the arhantship. Although, according to Jain philosophy, nobody will be able to do that in this time period for some reason because the world is. But I don't know what exactly I said. Maybe you can talk about it then.
I think we were talking about the idea that Shiva was the departure point for Jainism, as is the existence of the Big Bang is the departure point for astrophysics. Did you mention that as a point?
You mentioned earlier that Jiva always exists.
Jiva, not Shiva.
Jiva, okay.
Jiva, right.
What does that mean? I'm sorry, I
Okay, okay. See, Atman exists in Vedantic religion, Vedantic tradition by itself. And Atman then goes out, and when it's purified, actually the way Vedantic tradition is, there's Atma, and then there's illusion. It's called Maya. Everything that we have in this world is illusion, according to the Hindu philosophy at the time. Right? And there is Atma. So what is the problem? Problem is that you are living in this world of illusion. Everything is illusion. And you need to get rid of illusion. That's the Vedantic tradition. And once you get rid of illusion, you become Brahman. So it's the same in all these. Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism are similar. But if you go into deep down, they quite come with very different assumptions. And once you assume, as I said, once you start with different assumption, you end up differently. Not end up the same place, but you take a different track to go to the hill. So in Jainism, they say there is jiva. But jiva does not just exist pure by itself. It has these atomic or zero gravity, zero weight particles attached to them called karma, and that make them impure. That's the basic development of jiva, J-I-V-A. And so the way my sister would say, so that's like milk and water. You know, there's pure milk probably, and water is making it dirty. So you're living with a dirty Atman or Jiva. You're living in a dirty, right now you are not, or you can call it ignorance. You're living in the world of ignorance, which is Buddhists use also, and Jains also use. We talk about raga, dvesha, and ignorance. Raga, dosa, moha, right? 3 things in Buddhism. We'll talk about them a little bit. Any other question? Because we talked quite a bit of basic philosophy of Jainism we have covered. We'll get into practices. We'll get into the practices a little bit more so that you get what's happening today. We saw the temples today, but we'll see some more.
So when you mentioned that these karma particles, the negative energy that is attaching to you, does it attach like in a part of your body? And you know, in some meditative practices, you're focusing on like your chakras to clean out your chakras. Is that like when you're going through the purification process? Is there a bodily focus?
Yes, there is, but the focus in Jainism is not so much on meditation of the type. Most, just like there are 4 pillars of meditation, right? Most of the focus in Jainism in meditation. And can I hold on just for a couple of minutes? I'm just going to go to that topic, exactly what you're saying, because maybe in 5 minutes. So let me give you at least the point right now. Is the mind, not on this breath and other things also not there. And specifically not there. And I'll tell you why that is maybe useful or not useful to some people. The path that is taken is because of the assumption again, if you go in great detail. But yes, purification is important. We need to purify, then we'll feel more happy all the time. At least there is a gradation, different levels of happiness also mentioned in Jainism, that every level, everything you do, you get better at it. Okay.
So karma is fundamentally negative.
Karma is not fundamentally negative. She mentioned that, and I was going to. Okay, he asked whether karma is fundamentally negative. No, karma can be anything. There should be no karma at all. That's the idea. That's the philosophical. You can see negative means there should be positive also, and things like that. You get into this philosophical debate. Okay, so we already talked about this. Any other question before you get slightly easier? Actually, this is quite complicated, that whole topic, but once you set that up, rest follows. Any other question? Okay, so first and most important of the 5 precepts in Jainism. So these are absolutely, right from childhood we are taught. especially ahimsa. Thou shalt so a Jain will finds it difficult to kill mosquitoes, for example, just like the monks here sometimes find it difficult to kill mosquitoes, or ants, or things like that. It's very difficult for a Jain to walk. And the other three, as I said previously, are very much coming out of the philosophy of thou shalt not hurt somebody. And the last one is not there specifically in Buddhism, but limited attachment is there in Buddhism. It's kind as little things you want to keep, you should live with that. It will make you happier. This is an old symbol, not very old. I don't know how old it is. I could try to figure it out, but so you'll see in Jain temples and all, it basically says, do not do it. Don't kill. That's the idea. Don't hurt. And the circle in the center is about samsara always, and the words which are written in the middle are ahimsa. So I give you just one example from the influence of Jainism in India. India has a lot of influence, a lot of things which have been influenced by Jains in India. So this Jain guru on the left, Srimad Rajchandraji, he was what Mahatma Gandhi said, he was his spiritual teacher. And there are books of those days they used to write, people used to write letters to send it to somebody else, by mail. So all those mail letters were preserved and all those books. So how he brought non-violence, the concept of non-violence for getting independence from British India. That was an influence of a Jain guru on Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was not a Jain, or at least he was born as a Brahmin, I think. But he was living in a community with a bunch of Jains, so he used to meet them and so on and so forth. So Mahatma Gandhi's quotation basically says that this man has tremendous influence on me. I'm not going to read all these 12, but I'm going to mention 2 or 3 in big letters. So what do you do? What kind of, the word is tapa, or tapas in if you're Spanish, but it's not. So, and it's heavily practiced in Jain communities, and that's why I wanted to emphasize. These are the 12 things people do to purify themselves, to be able to speak truth, to be able to not kill, etc. Those attitudes you need to develop. You're not born with those. So the most common one is fasting. There are 6 which are what is known as outside and 6 inside. So I want to talk about the meditation now. So we'll talk about fasting in a minute, a little bit more. And similar to other, apparently, either written here or in the next slide I've written that Buddha did all this. Buddha was incredibly good at to live an ascetic life. He was very good in the sense fasting. He did 30-day fasting. 30-day fastings means he didn't do, to the best of my knowledge, 30-day fasting according to the books, but apparently he did. Was basically that you eat very, very little, like in the, I think Buddhist suttas or something similar. They talk about he ate 1 or 2 grains of food one day, then 2 grains of food or food the next day, waxing moon, and then for the next 15 days you start with 15 grains and go down to 1 grain. So in about 30 days you eat almost maybe a little food, 2 spoonfuls of food. And that's what Buddha did. Buddha did all these practices, fasting, controlling the food, with limited amount of food he did. And so I talked to Jains as to why is meditation not so much focused in Jainism. The argument is meditation is there in this 12. Especially number 11 is very important. Meditation is incredibly important in Jainism, but it's not practiced that much because or the idea that meditation is incredibly difficult. You must first develop your body and other practices before you go to meditation. And the same thing is done in yoga. Yoga Sutta of Patanjali. You do the Hatha Yoga, you do the practice to develop the body, strong body, so that you can meditate. And that was Patanjali's idea. So if you go to meditation, in some of these places, you really have to have a good body, so you can sit there for weeks or many hours a day, and then only you can meditate and think. So that's that. So some practices I want to mention. This is, now we're talking about day to day, what goes on every day in Jain community. Jain is a small community, 1% of the population in India, just 1%. Most Jains will fast at least once a year, 2 times a year, many of them 20 times a year. My mother would do every one pra, which is the same day in Jainism. One pra is the same as that is in Buddhism. 8th of the lunar day, and in Jainism is the 14th, here it is 15th from what I found out. Several times a year, birthdays of some supreme leaders. There are festivals of 8 days or 10 days fasting to practice those 8 tapas or 12 tapas and so on and so forth. And as I said before, Buddha did everything under the sun prescribed by the ascetics. So here is a photo of my niece, who's to my right here, with her daughter. She did 10-day fast. And after the 10-day, she's going to the temple in that particular moment. And everybody from the family came, they put her in a chariot, take to the temple, and then they eat a little food. And there are a lot of restrictions. After 10 days of fasting, you just don't start eating. You have to do very little food first day. The second day you eat a little bit more and certain types of food. Well, Jains know all that. Everybody knows exactly what you can eat or cannot eat after 10 days. So this is very common. This lady's, I've never seen a lady like this lady who's sitting in the middle. I happened to go to a Jain pilgrimage with my mother and others. I do that all the time because I enjoy it, and you meet all sorts of interesting people who are so religious in nature. She did 40-day fasting. So I was very suspicious. So I asked around, I asked the family members, Well, in Jainism, fasting means no food. No food means no food. No drink, no juice, nothing. In Jainism, fasting is absolutely nothing. Water once a day, strictly once a day, if it's pure full fast. So 40 days, and after, so I talked to my niece, she said, after 3 or 4 days, you don't care. Or 5 or 6 days, depending on the situation. You just don't care. Food is just a no nuisance, except that they do become weak, so it's a different story. So this lady did, and I was there, this is my photo, and she insisted, normally this is how the religious they are, she wants to first feed the monk on that day, on that particular day after 40 days. So then only I'll eat. And there was whole celebration until from morning to, okay, so that's everybody does that. Some people do half a day, some people do, I shall not eat sugar for the rest of my life, or I shall not do this. There are many of these monks, sort of take a vow of not eating sugar, not eating salt, not doing this and that. They make these rules for themselves. Diet, almost all Jains are vegetarians, as you know. Now, after sunset, so if I go to Jaipur, I'll eat my dinner at 6 o'clock with my brother. And the dining room is closed. But these days, their children now have started eating, so it's a different matter. And you can go to a restaurant in Sukhumvit. There is a restaurant where you can get Jain food, which is similar to Jai food. Nothing is grown underground, such as onions, garlics, etc., eaten by my mother never had in all her life garlic or onion. I didn't have it until the age 20 or so, and things like that. So here is a restaurant, and you see the signs here in Phuket, which says pure vegetarian and Jain food. So you can order Jain food in some of these places, which is very good. And this is thanks to mostly Gujaratis who popularized.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Could you describe Jainism as hardcore Buddhism? That's question number one. Question number two,
Hardcore Buddhism.
well, okay, the Buddhists believe in renunciation to a certain extent, but they're relatively moderate. I'm pretty moderate.
Middle path or middle way.
Yeah, middle way. Whereas someone perhaps like yourself tends to be more restrained. Okay. And then the second question, the follow-up to that question.
So what's the question?
The first question is Jainism a more extreme form of Buddhism, or is Buddhism a less extreme form of Jainism? Because
Yes is the answer to both.
is the fact that it's pretty tough to be a good Jain, is that maybe the reason Jains have been declining in number in places like India?
I think, first the second question, I think that has certainly contributed to decline of Jains, but that may not be the only reason. There may be, see, after the 700 approximately, India was attacked by all sorts of foreign powers for a long time. That's when Nalanda University, you know the name of the university, Nalanda University, which is a very famous, thousands and thousands of people came from China and other countries to study Buddhism. It was a Buddhist university which was burned down and Buddhists fled. So those time periods from 700 to 1200, basically Jainism and Buddhism declined quite a bit all the way. And then also now in the recent years, recent 200 to 300 years, 400 years, during the British period also, the third thing, Jains are is a fairly prosperous community, probably the most prosperous community among the religious communities in India on average. And prosperous people don't have many children. So that was also contributed to that. So combination of these, I don't think it was because very strict following. When Jains get married to somebody else, there is more of a higher probability that a person will not be a Jain anymore versus the other way around. It's easier in the society to live because Jains are smaller in number. But it was not hardship because you don't have to, I think I wrote in one of the slides, as much as you can, 5 precepts, as much as you can. That's the idea in Jainism. As much as you can. You cannot live without not walking in the night when you don't see the insects. The monks will not walk in the night, for example, traditionally, most of the time anyway. And monks will not walk on grass, for example, if they can avoid it. Things like that. So there are a lot of rules about that, but you don't have to follow any rules whatsoever. In your heart is important, which is sort of Buddhist concept more than a Jain concept. So I think that's probably the reason. Same thing happened with Buddhists. So Buddhist population has declined considerably. So I'll take some questions, any other question, because I'm going to go a little fast. Yeah.
Would you describe Jainism then more as a religion than a philosophy? Because it seems to have a lot of rules, a lot of
it's
descriptions.
It's similar to, I would say, Buddhism in that sense. People talk about that. Is it a philosophy or is it religion because there is no creator? And Western thought, when Western thought first came, they thought Jainism and Buddhism are not religions. Right? There were articles written on that Hindus. Actually, Alexander the Great came to India and he had a couple of, or more than a couple of philosophers with him. And he heard about them and said, why don't you go interview these naked philosophers? That's the word he used, philosophers. And those actually survived because Greeks, or wherever he was from, in that general area of Greece, they used to write on papyrus, and papyrus survives. In India, they didn't survive because of the very moist weather. But so a lot of Buddhist scriptures also survive because Chinese versions rather than Indian versions. So, is it a philosophy or is it a religion? I don't know. Okay. So we talked about 2 or 3 things about Jainism. One is going to the temple is very important. They go my mother used to go 2 to 4 hours once children were grown up, 4 hours a day. In the morning they'll go to the temple, hang around, do puja, then come eat, go to the temple in the evening. Temple is the center of activities for a lot of people, and even now. And the other things we talked about is fasting and all. There's a festival every week. There's some festival or other every week, more or less. And there's fasting going on. So I'll ask my brothers, well, what are you doing for your anniversary? Oh, we're going to do fasting and we're going to go to this temple. And that's what they do for anniversary celebration. And the next day they probably will have dinner, good dinner, things like that. Jains do that all the time. Anything and everything is fasting. They'll do fasting. And so for slightly middle-level Jains, 30, 40 fasts a year is not uncommon. Once a week approximately, or so. Very, very common. Half a day, very common. So puja. So puja, as you probably know the word, Visakha puja is very common. The word is the same, Visakha puja. And so without giving the details of how puja is run, in the interest of time, I'll just show you some photos. Here my sisters and all doing puja. They'll sit and say some mantras, rather than meditation, mantras. And this is probably a good time to explain the concept of mantra. Mantra is a form of meditation for some, at least the way my father explained, and some people practice it, because that forces you to focus. Focus on the mantra rather than the breath. And if you read new mantras, you better focus, because there's no choice. So I think last week the lady came here, Molly, and she taught us the type of meditation that is not common, the hand movement meditation, if you remember, this and that. And I thought that was wonderful. I really enjoyed it because it is so much more powerful than breath. When I try to pay attention to my breath, my mind goes everywhere. But when I pay attention, I have to do this hand movement in a particular coordinated manner, or walking meditation. I had to do this. You learn to focus. So in Jainism, the idea is to narrate or chant mantras, so you become very good. But of course, my mother would remember thousands of pages of scriptures. She did, actually, literally did. She would just do her work while chanting mantras. So I'm not sure it worked for her that much, but she got into meditation very quickly once I got into meditation about 15 years ago. Okay, so these are sceneries which Indians get together and do pujas all the time. For one reason or another, they will do the puja the whole day. They'll sit around, chant mantras and talk about things like that. Okay, I'll not go into great detail again, but this is very common in puja to actually offer, and we are not offering to anybody like a creator God. The concept is the same why Jains or Buddhists go to the temple. They don't ask anything. That is taught to the kids right from day one. You don't ask anything from the God or the statue. The idea is you ask for their knowledge, that I want to be like you, I want to be Arhat. That's the idea. I want to be Arhat. And therefore I have come to you so that I get inspired to be an Arhat. Just like we talk to our parents and all, we bow to them, not because all the time we are asking for something. We are asking for knowledge. The word enlightenment in Jainism is also used for supreme knowledge. that you want to have supreme knowledge. That's the enlightenment. That's one way to think about enlightenment. So there are several things that are offered, and there are mantras spoken about them. The water is very common for purity. So they're in front of a statue here, and people will get, if you go to a temple in the morning, you will never see this as a tourist in India if you go these kind of sceneries, because this is all done about 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, other than sometimes. So this here, my sister is sitting, and probably for some special reason, like probably her anniversary day, right? So she will do puja for 4 hours or something like that. And she will get together all these things, water and other things. And this is how I learned. I remember the word, the fruit is also offered. And fruit is offered in the same way, the way it is done in. So I was in a hospital one time. I said, I want to come back and get my blood test result. She said, "Fon truatla." So I said, yeah, fon. Fon is a phal, right? That's a word which is pronounced as fon in Thai, which means result. So this idea is to get good results, to offer. So these are, I'm going to just show you. Here is on the lower side, there's statues. Left statues are no clothing, no ornaments, and the right ones have ornaments and clothing, because they're two different sects. And in the same temple, you'll see this less common. It's not very common, but in foreign countries you'll see that, because there are not enough Jains. So this is San Francisco temple actually. And some Hindu temples will have a Jain statue. Sometimes they'll have even a Buddha statue, because earlier Hindus thought, this is okay, another monk, okay, we'll put his statue in there too. Things like that. So because, as you know, Hindus were all accommodating. They didn't believe that my religion is superior to yours. They believed, hey, you have a God, we have a God. You know, you worship your God, we worship our God. Big deal. These days things have changed apparently. And the mandala is also common in same thing as Buddhism. And this is in a big puja ceremony. They'll be dancing toward the end. All get together and dance. They put their plates. This is very common. You'll see Jains going to the temple in a group because a monk has arrived. Monks are not easy to find. Now it's becoming better. Or they're carrying something on their heads, water, to pour on the statue probably. Kids also get involved with this because they enjoy this part. They don't want to learn philosophy at this point, for sure. Okay, this is similar. The two symbols I want to show you. This is a Jain flag. You'll see this all the time. If you go to a Jain temple or a Jain, if you see this flag, people know there's something happening with Jains. And the 5 Namo, we read the first one, Namo Arhato. And then there are others, Namo Siddhanam, we worship all the Sangha teachers and so on. Okay, the first top point, on the top point here, with the half circle, is the place you want to be. That's the idea. You want to go to Arhat, the enlightened place. There are 3 points below that are the 3 main points is Samyak Darshan, Sammathitit, right view, right jhana, and right practice. This is how you get there. Then there is this swastika, which is not a Jain symbol. I think it was before Jains, or at least before 2600 years. Certainly was there as a good Indian symbol. And this is circulating in some places. Is the 4 stages you can. This is samsara. You're circling in the world. You know, you could be a deva, human being, an animal, or in the hell, and you want to get out of that. So this is sort of that. And this is also, you'll see this all the time. So this combines ahimsa with the other symbols I talked about. So you'll see in any Jain temple, Jain situation, shops. If a shop you see this sign, then people know this is a Jain shop. That must be good. That's partly true. Okay, so I'm not going to through these 12. These are known as 12 bhavanas. And I want to just emphasize impermanence, which is very familiar to all of us who have studied a little bit of Buddhism. So Jainism, the first thing you must meditate on all the time when you're sitting here doing nothing, then you think about impermanence. The world is impermanent. There's nothing permanent. And this is, so if you learn this, then you don't need to learn anything else. So impermanent is there in both Jainism and Buddhism as the main source of. Okay, so we talked about this earlier, where you are and how far you're going. So you keep improving at the 14 stages. There could be many more. Okay. So I want to, this is the last section. I want to sort of, not much to say, but some photos. Same 5 precepts, but a very strict level. So senior male monks in Digambar will be naked. We'll see some photos. And others, white clothing. They don't even have utensils. They'll eat only with their hands. They don't have clothing. Mosquitoes love them, of course. They live in a sangha. And unlike Buddhism, unlike many other religions, I'm not criticizing, that's a tradition. Jain monks don't live any town for more than a few months. 4 months is not uncommon once a year during the Kaupansa, which is the same time as Buddhists right now. So these are nuns, is obviously taken a photo. Sitting here, I'll show you this photo. They carry this made of feathers or peacocks. Whenever they sit down, before they sit down, they'll brush that place in case they don't sit on some ants or something. And if they see some ants and they have to cross, they'll just use this and all the time. They'll also bless using this. The Digambar monks have this, the Satambar monks have slightly different version. So you know the person on the left, right? This is Narendra Modi with blessings from a Jain monk. I have similar photos, but I thought Modi was more famous than I was, so you'll recognize him. So, of course, the politicians, they go to all the monks all over the country. And here's my family worshipping. This is a puja to a guru. Guru means a monk. Here are a bunch of monks. It's a very uncommon scene to see so many of them at the same time, because there are not so many around the country. Few hundreds now. And these are the other sect. They wear white clothes and they actually cover their, well, so that when they talk, they are even extreme form of ahimsa in a way. That when they talk, they don't want to kill the insects using the warm breath and things like that. So these are nuns. Again, Sutambar sect. Here is a Jain monk eating, a Jain senior monk eating. They eat standing up. They're fully naked. People feed them. They eat with their hands. And they eat standing up. There's limited amount of time you can stand up probably and eat so much. And they're a lot more strict about if they have a dead ant in the food, they'll stop eating for the day. Is a Jain monk meditating. This person I talked to for a long time, and he has taken a 12-year vow that after 12 years he will give up eating, and will. So Jain desire among monks and a lot of people, including my mother types, would say they die. They want to become a monk and then die. So this person just died last week. Actually, this person being a monk, he's a family member of ours. And he was fairly old. He wanted to become a monk, wanted to live a simple life. But in the end, the monk gave him permission, and he was ill by the time after that. So they carry this to the cremation place after he's died, and standing up, sitting down rather than lying down. That's so this is a conclusion section. I'll just read this in 1 minute and then we'll have 10 minutes to take some questions. Jainism and Buddhism follow slightly different trails. Soul versus no soul, devotion versus meditation, but aim for the same summit. and similar ideas later on. So I wrote this. I kind of have some, I give some charity, have t-shirts with Jain equal to Ahimsa, which I distribute sometimes, because that's the ultimate philosophy of Jainism, which has affected the world. And so I had to say, so if you combine Buddhism philosophy with meditation, which is what I have noticed, I've been with learning a little bit of Buddhism for the last 15 years, and it's all meditation to me, mostly anyway. So if you combine Ahimsa, non-violence, and with meditation, I think the world will be a great place to live. Get rid of, I think I'll skip those things. These just photos. In interest of time, I'll skip those. So I was just mentioning Jain community today. I'll leave it here. Jain community today is the richest community in the country by far. It's 1% of the population, probably 15% of the wealth, or so. And they are the most educated, because Jains always focused upon education from childhood, from hundreds of years. Almost 100% literacy rate in India, women and men, forever. And they are also very active in social work. I think you went someplace and met some people, probably. I'm not sure. So a lot of Jains will say it's because of the practice of the religion. I don't know if it's true or not, but clearly my grandfather used to say, you will never see a Jain in a court where he has been charged with murder or something serious crime. Never. He said, I've never heard of a Jain. Nowadays, of course, you see some. But during my grandfather's time, he would say, British will never punish a Jain because they don't believe the Jains can commit this crime. That was the reputation of Jains at the time. Even now, if you go, anyway, those are effects of philosophy or religion, whatever, which are in practice right now. I think I'll stop at this point. We have 10 minutes. You can do meditation, or you can do questions, or whatever.
I guess, Wilson, maybe we're already in talk mode, so maybe if anybody has any questions, we can ask questions, and if not, maybe we'll take 5 minutes of meditation.
I have a silly question. So how come you can't, Jains do not eat anything that's from underground?
This is a practice for hundreds of years, probably 1,000 to 2,000 years since the beginning. There are two arguments which have been made. One was that you have to pull the whole plant and kill the plant in many cases. And that's not worth it. You should better, good or bad, I don't know. I mean, I'm a scientist, so I'll not go that far. The second, my grandfather liked this idea, that when you plow and cultivate these kind of plants, a lot more insects and others you have to kill than a plant that is growing on the top. Although I don't know for sure about everything there, but that's the argument that's given. Jains, because of that reason, also did not go into agriculture. And that was one reason why Jains became successful, because they went in businesses, trading. They are among the traders. They are among the diamond jewelers and others, all over the world. Just like when the Chinese came to this country, they were prohibited from working for the government. So what did they do? They lent money and made more money, right? So those kind of things happened. So some of these side effects happened. But clearly they are, very few poor Jains. Very few meaning maybe 10% still. But standard of Jains is very high on average.
Why is there such an obsession with food and fasting?
Okay, the argument is if you want to follow a path, first thing that should come to your mind is food. That's where you will know what you're thinking. So if food should be pure, or whatever path you're following. That was the argument. So food, you practice first, then other things. Puja and everything else comes later. And that was the argument.
If they're becoming more moderate now, the concern about vegetarianism, etc.
So what's becoming?
I mean, his question was, why are you excessive? And with the passage of time, are Jains like the rest of us becoming less concerned about things like this?
Yes, definitely. Things have really changed. Right? Right. If that's the question you're asking. When I was young, meaning 10 years of age or 15, everybody would go to the temple in the morning.
Right.
I mean, you will not be fed. Your father, mother will not give you food unless you've been to the temple at least for 30 seconds, within a kilometer or so, unless it's very far away. And things like that. You have to, as I said, I didn't see onions or garlic until the age when I went to college. There was no onion, garlic. Even until my mother lived, there was no onion, garlic in my home, even though my brother was married and had children and so on. No garlic at home, never. Even now it's rare.
Prem, I'd like to thank you very much. Prem has kind of proof of what he's talking about. You spent 45 years in the United States, and you come back, and you're still a pretty solid Jain/Buddhist, and he's also going now, I believe, to India to do some work, charity work. So it's, it's proof of your background and your belief system. And I would like to thank you for a talk that I learned a great deal tonight from your pictures, from your scholarship, and from your anecdotes. So I find myself, I wouldn't want to call myself an expert on Jainism, but I'm no longer a total novice. So I'd like to thank you. On less exalted areas, we're trying to get our seats back where they belong. The white chairs go into that room, the brown chairs go into here, okay? On an even more commercial area, we have two boxes in the other room. One goes to Banari, which has provided us over the last couple of years with a place. We were homeless and they gave us a home. And we have a box that says, thank you for that. And let's continue that as long as humanly possible. The second box is a little bit more ambiguous. Sometimes it goes to the speaker. Sometimes the speakers say, okay, you guys need a little bit of money to handle your transportation, etc. So it's either a speaker / our common fund. And so that's the second box. Okay, and the last thing that we're going to have, we have meetings like this every Monday. Sometimes we have lay speakers, sometimes we have monastics, and we're always welcome to come here. We're trying to continue this as a Monday tradition, and we've done so for the last year or so, and there's also streaming, so we're going to have some streaming. So the last one, I guess, is going to be Joe. Sometimes you arrange for coffee afterwards, and sometimes you don't. Is this going to be one of the coffee nights?
Yeah, for those of you who are new, some of us usually will go to a nearby restaurant to continue the conversation and get to know each other. And so everyone is invited to join us.
Prem, thank you, and thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for everything. Thank you very much. It's all because.
Great depth of scholarship. I love some nice mix, right?
That's what I wanted to do on purpose, because if you just get philosophy and you start talking about 5 precepts in great depth, people.
Yeah, I mean, people here, especially Buddhists know much
Where
about.
we put your white chairs?
I see.
White chairs out or back?
Oh, those go to over that way. Yeah. We're going to go for coffee. No, please.
Chris. How are you? Good, good. Self is okay. Self is okay. Okay. Self.
No self.
No self. No self. My
No self, but okay.
my no self is not doing as well as myself.
Oh, well, I
Because it keeps saying, you guys aren't paying attention to my no self. Yeah.